Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Before we start with our today's analysis, we have an announcement. BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS is resuming the weekly current affairs explained session. The topic for today's discussion, India's crackdown on VPN. So please do tune in from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. and this session will be handled by Chetan sir. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says Bulldozer Injustice to Teach a Lesson. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. There are a number of states in India. We have states like Uttar Pradesh, we have states like Madhya Pradesh, where this bulldozer justice is being implemented in all these states. What is this bulldozer justice? Heavy machinery like the JCBs are employed to demolish houses of those who have protested and have been accused of rioting. So if a person or a group of people have engaged themselves in protesting against the government, they have harmed the public property, and in case they have been accused of rioting, such people houses have been destroyed. Houses, shops and small establishments have been bulldozed in some of the states like Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh to teach them the lesson. This is what is called as bulldozer justice. But the author here in this particular case, who happens to be Justice Madan B. Lakur, prefers to call this as bulldozer injustice and not justice. Now the question is, why is the author calling so? That is because when we speak about protests in India, protest is a fundamental right which is guaranteed to the people. They would be able to protest, but this has to be peaceful as well. They should not be carrying any arms as well, in case there are people who engaging in violent activities. In such a case, we already have the Indian Penal Code. We also have number of other laws as well which will immediately come into picture, and they can be penalized or fine can be imposed as well. But what is happening in the present situation? We have governments of multiple states where they're using their executive authority, and in a way which is extra constitutional in paradigm, what they are doing is demolishing these houses. So the author in this particular case goes on to say that the means and the tools used by the government in this particular case is extremely worryful and is violating the due process. It is in this particular backdrop we have to understand how the state, the executive authorities have violated some of the constitutional principles. They have also violated the natural justice principles, and this ultimately means there are a number of concerns with respect to this demolition, which is called as the so-called bulldozer justice. Let's look into the constitutional principles. When we look into the constitutional principles, we have the right to housing, which happens to be a fundamental right recognized under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Right to life guarantees right to food, water, decent environment, education, medical care, as well as shelter. In fact, the right to housing is also an important part of the international laws as well. So when we have the constitution which recognizes right to housing, when we also have international law which recognizes housing, how is the government able to destroy, demolish the houses is the first major concern. And we have the Supreme Court in UP Awas Evam Vikas Parishad versus French Coop Housing Society Limited. It was held that the right to shelter is a fundamental right which springs from the right to residence assured in Article 19 of 1 of E and the right to life under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Then in Chameli Singh versus the state of Uttar Pradesh, it was also held that the right to shelter, when used as an essential requisite to the right to live, should be deemed to have been guaranteeing a fundamental right. So because the state has used this bulldozers or the so-called extra constitutional tool, this ultimately has led to violation of Article 21 as well as Article 19 of 1 of E is the first major concern. The next important factor is in terms of the natural justice principle. One of the principles of the natural justice clearly goes on to say that every party will have to be heard. Whenever there is a petition that is filed, there are two parties in a petition. So both the parties will have to be heard. But in this particular case, we have the state which is currently engaged in the so-called bulldozer justice, but the other party is not heard, which basically means that it is also violating the principles of natural justice. So when we speak speak about fair hearing, we have two important principles. One is what is called as notice, the other is what is called as hearing. What is this notice? Let's say, for example, as a principle of fair hearing, the other person will also have to be heard as well. So this person will also have to be given notice as well. This notice will say what is the cause of the issue, where this person has to appear, what time he has to appear, which place he has to appear, what is the nature of hearing, and all other details will be given as part of this notice. The second is with respect to the hearing. What happens? The other person will also have to be heard. But in this bulldozer justice, the person was not given ample amount of time. Even if the notice was given, it was for a very short period, and ultimately the natural justice principle, where an other party should have been heard, is ultimately violated. What are the various concerns and issues? The authorities in this case have pointed out that these were the illegal structures. Okay, let's assume for a moment that these are illegal structure. Ideally, if it is an illegal structure, what should have happened? You should have taken it to the court of law. The other party should have been heard. It is the court which ultimately has to decide whether it is an illegal structure or not. And once you feel that this is an illegal structure as guaranteed by the court of law, then they would be able to bulldoze it or even destroy it. But in this particular case, even before they could file an appeal, fight it in the court of law, the executive has used this tool, and this means it is violating the law as well. And if we are speaking about the rioters, and if we are speaking about those who are protesting, what should happen? They should have been taken to the court of law as well. And when there is court of law to decide, who is the executive to decide? And even the demolition of homes of all these alleged violators have no basis in law as well. Do we have a law that is passed by the parliament? Do we have a law passed by the state legislative assembly? Since there was no law in force, this is also extra constitutional. This is also ultra vires the constitution, is the second major concern. It is in this backdrop the author says that the state has also violated some of the due process of law. How? First, the state collected taxes from the so-called illegal construction. Was the illegality of the construction condoned? If not, was not the state complicit in perpetuating the illegality and also earning out of it? Has any action been taken by the state against its complicit officials? What do we understand by this? According to the authorities, the building that was raised happened to be an illegal structure. Since it is an illegal structure, yes, you may feel that it is illegal. You can go ahead and raise it as well. But the problem is you are collecting the taxes. You are collecting the taxes from this particular building as well, and you're reaping the benefits because you're collecting the taxes. So if this is an illegal structure, why did you collect the tax is the question the author is asking to the government. The second question the author takes into picture is that the well-settled principle requiring state action to be just, fair and reasonable mandates in the absence of any terrible urgency another opportunity to appear for the hearing. If the government felt that it was urgent, it should have taken this in front of the court of law. It should have asked for the faster delivery. Even if not, this person should have been given another opportunity to be heard. So in all these cases, the person was not given another opportunity. It was not taken before the court of law. It was not asked for the faster delivery of the justice if it felt that this was an illegal construction. So it meant that it is violating the rule of law principle as well. Third, house was demolished on a Sunday, which is a government holiday. Fourth, the demolition order was pasted on the wall of Mr. Javed's house on Saturday. The author takes into picture one of the examples with respect to Javed, and he says that this particular posting on the wall happened on Saturday night and the demolition took place on Sunday morning. Look at the time period, the Saturday to Sunday. So they have not given ample amount of time as well. This basically means that they have violated the rule of law principle. They have bulldozed this house, making use of the executive tool, and this ultimately means that punishment without trial has been executed on this person. So such disproportionate action against someone's house is an exemplary punishment, and this is nothing but hypervigilantism by the state, says the author. Thus, this particular so-called bulldozer justice is bad in law, morally unjustifiable, and not a right thing to do in the spirit of of international spotlight, says the author. So what is the solution? What is the way forward as of now for all those people whose houses have been bulldozed, whose houses have been demolished? What the government has to do is provide them compensation as well. And at the same time, these people would have gone through emotional distress, so they should also be compensated for the emotional distress. And at the same time, all those officers who have executed this particular issue should be held accountable and they should be prosecuted. In fact, we also have the State Human Rights Commission in Uttar Pradesh. The State Human Rights Commission should be completely disbanded because they are not looking at the grievances of the people, and ultimately all these issues will have to be taken into picture by the government in the near future, says the author. So what is that we understand here? In a constitutional democracy, the bulldozer on a rampage becomes a symbol of brutal executive, and it is the right time for the judicial intervention to uphold the constitutional principle and check the excesses of the executive. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says waiting for the jobs. The article here is speaking about the periodic labor force survey. If we look into the context, the article goes on to say that India is a country of demographic dividend. So we have the youth population. This youth population should be the working population, and with this in picture, what we are aspiring is to become one of the greater economies as well. But in the last few years, what we are witnessing is the rampaging unemployment crisis. If we look into the statistics, periodic labor force in 2018 revealed that India's unemployment rate was highest at 6.07% in the 4 decades. The latest PLFS suggests that the numbers now are not so drastic, with the overall unemployment rate at 4.2% in 2020 and 21 compared to 4.8% in 2019 and 20, and the labor force participation rate increasing to 41.6%, up from 40.1% in 2019 and 20. Before we understand what are the factual data given by this article, we have to understand what is this periodic labor force survey. The periodic labor force survey gives an estimate of the key employment and the unemployment indicators. How many people are employed, how many people are unemployed, and gives the entire statistics with respect to the labor force participation rate, worker population ratio, unemployment rate, and these indicators and the current weekly status are given by this periodic labor force survey. So if we speak about the labor force participation rate, it is defined as the percentage of persons in labor force working or seeking or available for work. So remember, when we speak about labor force participation rate, it includes 3 important parameters. One, those who are working. It can be an organized sector, it can be unorganized sector. So there are people who are working. The second is those who are seeking. So they are looking for jobs. That will also fall under the labor force participation rate. The third is those who are available for the job. So it includes 3 parameters. One is working, seeking, or available for work. Then we have worker population ratio, which is defined as the percentage of employed persons in the population. Then unemployment rate, which is defined as the percentage of persons unemployed among the persons in the labor force. These do not have a job in hand. And the current weekly status, which is the activity status determined on the basis of a reference period of last 7 days preceding the date of survey, is what is known as the current weekly status. So this is the data that is collected for the past 7 days. If we look into the current periodic labor force survey, it gives us the following statistics. Employment in the unpaid self-employed category continued to show an increase in 2020 and 21 by rising to 17.3% from 15.9% in 2019 and 20 and 13.3% in 2018 and 19, and rural unpaid employment also showed increase to 21.3% in 2020-21, 20% in the previous year, while that of the urban areas increased to 6.3% from 5.7%. Unpaid self-employment for females increased to 42.8% in rural areas from 42.3% a year ago, while that for the rural males increased to 11% from 10.4%. In urban areas, unpaid self-employment for females showed a significant increase to 12.4% in 2020 and 21 from 11.1% 4.1% in 2019 and 20, while that for the males increased to about 4.5% from 4.1%. The PLF data further shows that the share of labor force engaged in the agriculture sector continued to show a rise in 2020 and 21, increasing to 46.5% from 45.6% in 2019 and 42.5% in 2018. This happens to be a reversal of the decades-long decline in the labor force participation in agriculture. Finally, in rural areas, both males and females recorded a slight moderation in agriculture employment to 53.8%, 75.4% respectively, from 55.4% and 75.7% in the previous year. So what this clearly depicts is that in some areas there have been an improvement, and in some areas there have been problematic as well. So what are the concerns because of this particular survey? PLF's data will not bring much cheer to the government. That is because as of now, when you look at the numbers, you might have had the unemployment rate comparatively reduced from the last few years. However, this is primarily into the lower productive and unpaid jobs away from the salaried employment. Ideally, the government should have been happy that the unemployment has decreased, but the government will not be happy primarily because the overall employment situation has showed very little improvement, but the rise was seen in the low quality and the unpaid work as well. Despite the unemployment reducing, what we are witnessing is low quality work, unpaid work, which is why the government may not be happy as well. Worryingly, industrial jobs have decreased with more employment in the agricultural and farm related jobs, a trend that has accelerated following the lockdown and has not reversed since then. When we look into the agricultural sector, what exactly happened? The agricultural sector had gathered pace in the past, but then there are a number of people who started moving from the rural areas to the urban areas as well. They wanted to explore multiple other areas as well, but when COVID hit us all, what happened? There was reverse migration. So those people who are working in the urban areas, who moved from the rural areas to the urban areas, started going back to their rural areas. Why? Because there was no opportunities in the urban areas. So what we witnessed is the reverse migration of labor from the cities to the villages, and this ultimately put a lot of pressure on the agriculture sector. Unemployment rates among the educated, above secondary education and the youth have also declined marginally, but it is not helping much, and the wage rates have continued to remain lower for those employed in either salary jobs or self-employed compared to the pre-pandemic period, with the increases being marginal in the lockdown driven days of the pandemic. So even if they have jobs, they are not given much of the opportunities. Their salaries are comparatively less, says this article. So what are the measures that the government of India will have to take going forward? As of now, the Narendra Modi government has said that they'll be recruiting as much as 10 lakh personnel in the next few years, but these are not new jobs that are being created, but just that there are vacancies and these vacancies are getting fulfilled. So there is no job creation, but only vacancies are getting filled. So this is not adding anything to the job market. In the next few years, what we will have is large number of youth who will also be entering the job market. So unemployment may become a major cause of concern. So it is the right time for the government to improvise on the quality of employment and ultimately go on a war footing with respect to the unemployment crisis. So what is that the government will have to do? Apart from it creating more jobs in the garment sector, it also has to make sure that it becomes easier for the industry and the service sector to operate efficiently and effectively in the country, whereby it has to reduce the bureaucratic red tape. It has to make sure that this entire paradigm of establishing the company is also becoming investor friendly. These are some of the measures that the government will have to take so that the unemployment crisis in the country is comparatively reduced. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says the move to link credit cards with UPI. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. When we look into the context, we have the Reserve Bank of India, which has come up with a proposal to allow linking of credit cards with the unified payments interface system. What do we understand by this? Let's assume for a moment that you go to one of the shops close by. This shop has a QR code. So what do? In case you want to buy a particular product, you want to buy groceries as well, you make the payment making use of the QR code. So you scan the QR code and ultimately you make the payment to that person. How does this work? In case you have a debit card, a savings bank account, you would be able to integrate the same with respect to that payment gateway. And ultimately, if it is PhonePe or Paytm, what will it do? It is linked directly to the debit card or to the savings account, and it debits the money from your savings account or the current account via the debit card. But in the near future, what you can also make use of is the credit card as well. As of now, you're only making use of the debit card, you're only making use of the savings and the current account. But in the near future, you would also be able to pay via the QR code using your credit card. If we look into the statistics, the UPI has over time become a popular mode of payment in India with more than 26 crore unique users. In May 2022, about 595 crore transactions amounting to 10.4 lakh crore were processed through the interface. Since there are large number of people who are making use of the UPI transactions, which is why the Reserve Bank of India felt the credit card should be added as part of the UPI transactions. As of now, it is only the debit card which is used, but in the near future, what you will also have is the credit cards which can be used as part of this transaction. So what are the advantages? The advantages would be that customers would be able to use new avenue. As of now, it is only the debit card. In the near future, it will be the credit card as well. So this will further enhance the convenience. Since they're making use of the credit card to make the payment, they need not have to have the money in the present situation. So they would be able to pay for that particular product or for the groceries, and they would be able to make the payment of the credit card in the next cycle as well. That's the first advantage for the customers, and added to it, this will also deepen the reach of the credit cards as well. As of now, it is only the debit cards that are being used, but since credit cards can also be linked to the UPI in the near future, then the use of the credit cards will also increase. Many people also use credit cards for rewards and benefits, and also for the security as well. So in the near future, more people will also start using credit cards instead of debit cards. But what is the major issue? As of now, they haven't spoken anything to do with the merchant discount rate. So this merchant discount rate, whether it will be applicable or not, will have to be given, and a clarification will have to be issued by the Reserve Bank of India. But do note, when it comes to the execution of this particular project, it will be executed first for all the credit cards which is housed on RuPay. The system will be established, and only after it works, it will be eventually used for Visa as well as the MasterCard. So first it will be tested for the RuPay credit card holders, and eventually down the lane, what we will have is the Visa and the MasterCard, which will be explored as well. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the urban heat island. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. What is an urban heat island? This is a local and temporary phenomenon experienced when certain pockets within a city experience higher heat load than surrounding or neighboring areas on the same day. What do we understand by this? Temperatures in the urban areas are often a few degrees more than the rural areas surrounding it. This temperature discrepancy that we witness in the urban areas in comparison to the rural areas is what is called as urban heat island. So basically, the heat gets trapped near the earth's surface as a result of decline in green cover. There is rapid urbanization, there is energy intensive activities, there are concrete structures in the urban areas, and as a result, what we have is more temperatures in the urban areas than in the rural areas, which is called as the urban heat islands. The rural areas have relatively larger green cover in the form of plantations, farmlands, forests, trees as compared to the urban spaces. This green cover plays a major role in regulating heat in the surroundings in the rural areas. However, when it comes to the urban areas, they do not have the green cover. Gardens are very less and they are often developed with high-rise buildings, roads, parking spaces, pavements and transit routes for the public transport. As a result, heat regulation is either completely absent or man-made, which is why what we have is called as an urban heat island effect. What are the causes of the urban heat island? Cities usually have buildings constructed with glass, bricks, cement, concrete, all of which are dark colored materials, meaning they attract and absorb heat content. So you have the houses, shops, industrial buildings which are constructed very close to each other. This may give rise to urban heat islands. These materials are usually very good at insulating, holding the heat, and as a result what we have is urban heat island in the urban areas. People and their tools such as cars and factories, they are burning a lot of energy as well. This ultimately means because we have the concrete jungle established in the urban areas, it has resulted in the urban heat island. What are the effects of the urban heat island? There is increased energy consumption. What happens? Because there is urban heat island, there are more temperature in the urban areas, and when there is more temperature in the urban areas, we start using the ACs as well, we start using the remotes, we start using the fans as well. This means there is increased energy consumption, and as a result, when there is increased energy consumption, there is more coal that is used. Because this is used for the power, then what we also have is because of these ACs and fans, there are greenhouse gas emissions, and this also leads to air pollution. This also poses danger to the aquatic ecosystems. How? Because there is change in the temperature. This can also have impact on the aquatic species as well. Ultimately, this can also bring a lot of discomfort and danger to the human health as well. This can result in heat cramps, sleep deprivation, increased mortality rates, so on and so forth. So remember, this will basically amplify the energy demand. This will increase the energy bills as well, and ultimately there can be power outages, blackouts, so on and so forth. How do we control the urban heat islands? The main way to cut heat load within the urban areas is increasing the green cover, filling up open spaces with trees and plants. Other ways of heat mitigation include appropriate choice of construction materials, promoting terrace and kitchen gardens, and painting white or light colors on terraces wherever possible to reflect the heat. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. Demolition drives conducted in multiple states. Violate due process. Discuss. Write a note on periodic labor force survey and explain why the Indian government is not generating enough jobs. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.